Martin, and welcome to another edition of Astronomy for Beginners. And today we're going to do a reviewing guide on the latest planetary camera that's out at the moment, and it is pretty cool, and that is the ZWO ASI120MC S. Now, ZWO, there's a lot of branded planetary cameras out there, and you can get some really decent planetary cameras out there for a decent sort of price. And you can get a good Celestron, which is the next star image. You can get the QHY IMG planetary cameras. So there's a variety of good planetary cameras out there. Now, for reasons why we use a dedicated planetary camera is to do with if you guys have owned a webcam and you've taken images through your telescope with a normal webcam, you'll probably find you get some good images, but there is a bit of a disadvantage with the webcam. The webcam can only go to a certain amount of speed, which is the frames per second rate. Now, what I mean by frames per second rate is the amount of frames that are captured literally within a second. And usually webcams can usually get between 10 to 15 frames per second, which isn't a lot, and you need to capture a lot of frames to get reasonable or decent results. So, for you guys who are wanting to take some excellent planetary images or lunar images, it's best to invest on a fully dedicated planetary webcam. Now, these, depending on the price you pay, you can get some really good budget ones for about 80 to about £100, and those can give you really good decent frame rates of around about 30 to about 60 frames per second. However, for your hardcore planetary images out there who wanting nothing but the best, look into something like a planetary camera that will deliver between 70 to even 200 frames per second. And I'm not joking, there are cameras out there that are lightning fast. However, the reason why you need these higher frame rates is that you need to capture as much data as you can, because the Earth's atmosphere is very turbulent. And what I mean very turbulent is it shimmers, so every little single frame is counted. So just that hint of that moment of seeing where the Earth is steady for one moment, once it's steady, the camera will capture as much frames as possible to try and capture the hidden detail which is ruined by the Earth's atmosphere. Hence the reason why these cameras are ultra fast. Now, you can pick them up really between 180 to about £300, and you can get a mono or a colour. However, today I'm going to show you this camera that I bought last week. I've just used it last night and I was actually quite impressed on what I've got. The results are absolutely astounding. This is the ZWO. This is the ASI camera, and it's the 120MC2. Basically, this is a USB-free camera, so you can imagine the amount of speed you can get through this camera alone. For your guys who are wondering why do you want to buy a high-speed camera, right? This has been recommended in several astronomy magazines. It's got top reviews. Even the top planetary astrophotographers are using this camera. This camera is the business, and we're talking people like Damien Peach is an excellent astrophotographer, especially for the planets, and he's using this camera. This is the secret. If you want hardcore camera images that you want to get the best out of your scope, this is the sort of camera you need to be looking at. So what we're going to do now, we're going to take a close look at the camera and its contents. Quite a very well packaged product, the ASI. ZWO is I think it's a Chinese brand, but don't let that concern you. You can get some really good high quality astro gear from Chinese firms like Skywatch and all that. They are really good. The Chinese have made some fantastic high quality products over the years, and this is definitely one of them. In fact, this is so good in high quality, I think it beats the QHY, to be honest with you. But as we open inside the box, very compact. I will say I've opened this previously, but again, you've got the phone package. Basically, very smart layout. You've got the camera itself here, and you've got the USB 3 cable, which is quite long. Basically, we're looking around about 3 meters long, this cable, so it's more than adequate. Quite high quality cable, and we'll take a closer look at the camera itself. Now, this is the ASI120MC S. It's got an aluminium ionized body. It's very light. Alright, it's got the USB port here, which is the USB port 3, but depending on which camera you buy, you can get the USB 2 or the 3 variants. One nice little feature that I do like, alright, is high quality. I like this eye lens. This eye lens is around about 150 degrees. It gives you a very wide field lens. This can be used for an all-round sky imaging, so you can take a huge part of the sky. Right, so you don't have to fix it onto a telescope. You can fix this onto the floor and take a very nice wide field view of the sky. But it also can be used as a general sort of use camera, so you can take so when you're testing it out, you can see how it performs then. I like it how it's capped. You can unscrew this part, so this part all comes in the wanna. It's very good quality thread on there. Alright, and you can see the chip. Right, this is a 3.75 micron chip. Alright, it's quite tiny. This is what I like about this camera. It also has a nice thread that you can also connect a T2 adapter, so you can connect 2-inch nose piece as well, so it can fit also the bigger telescopes. It takes the 2-inch format. One thing I do like is that it's got a very decent chip, a very good decent chip. It is a CMOS, believe it or not. It's a CMOS chip, and it has a 1/3 of an inch CMOS chip, around about 1.2 megapixels, which doesn't sound a lot, but it's not the megapixels you're concerned about. What you're concerned about is the pixel size. The pixel size being around about 3.75 microns, which is a very, very fine detailed chip, so it gives you a very good resolution, and it also it's got a pixel size of 1280 by 960 pixel array size. So again, one thing, a nice feature I do like is that it's got an IR built-in filter to protect this chip. Alright, so as well as to make it much more sensitive, it also protects the sensor as well, so and that's what you need. Also, what I do like about this camera is so practical, and I mean incredibly practical. What I mean is that this camera, as well as being a very good high frame rate planetary camera, this camera can also be used as an auto guider, which you know as there's an ST4 port here, so you can actually use this camera as an auto guider. So if you're using deep sky imaging, you can guide using a guide scope or whatever format you're using, guide scope or piggyback, to able to take long astro photos. This can act as a guider, and also, believe it or not, this camera can also be used as a deep sky long exposure camera. Now that is very impressive. This is a good all-round camera that can do virtually everything you need. However, one slight drawback is if you're taking long astro photos, you are restricted to a certain amount of exposure times. Now this camera can go to about 1000 seconds, so you can get really good images through this camera. However, when you're increasing the exposure time, there is a problem. This camera is not cooled. Alright, it has got these very nice, very fine ventilated got heatsink here, which will help to reduce, will help to aid cooling to a certain degree, but then you'll start making up, you'll start getting a lot of noise in the chip and all that on your images, and it will start to diminish the views. However, one thing I do like about the ASI120 is that ZWO have really concentrated on their products. They've really looked at it. Now, again, you've got a 1/4 standard camera adapter thread here, which you can mount it on a tripod or whatever. But the nice little feature that I do like, and it's not that not most people have realised what this is I do like this. If at these points here, these are 4mm metric threads, and what these threads, alright, you can actually attach a tech cooling fan. So believe it or not, if you can get a cooling fan that will fit onto there, and you can screw it on there, you can actually adapt a pellet cooling fan on there to help assist the cooling on this camera, so that you can reduce as much of the noise, camera noise, as possible. Not a lot of people know about that, but I've looked into it, and that's what these are for. Alright, so I was quite impressed by that. So again, the camera can do virtually everything you need, and for a really good price as well. I paid around about €370, which works out around about £260 to £280. Believe me, it sounds expensive at first, but when you've got a camera that can do many things, you know, use it as a guider, use it as a high-speed planetary killer, and also a diesel imager as well. When you think about it, it's worth the money. It is actually worth the money. All right, and I really was quite impressed with that. Obviously, the camera has its own 1.25" nose piece, which will screw in very smartly in there, like so, and it comes with its own dust cap. Alright, so it's nice and sealable. Alright, again, taking a look at the box, again with the USB 3 cable. It also comes, believe it or not, with its own ST4 cable, which I am absolutely really impressed, because there's not a lot of products out there, astro gear wise, that actually comes with its own ST4 leads. Basically, these are the leads that you're going to use if you're going to use the camera to auto guide. I'm actually quite impressed with that, because a lot of gear you can't get these. You have to buy these separate. But the whole package, it comes with its own ST4 leads, and they actually are very good leads. They're not cheap looking. They're actually really high quality. Again, looking further in, it comes with its own driver, so you can install the driver for the camera towards your computer. Alright, so overall, fantastic little package. Everything you need in there, and there's a lot of cool features. Absolutely fantastic. The good thing about this camera is, because there's no cooling, there is no need for external power. So basically the powers come directly from the USB port, right? So there is no need to start fitting, there's no need to fit a external battery pack to run the camera. Basically, this will run straight from the main computer's battery, alright, and it will run the software automatically. However, one slight technical hitch with this camera. There's something that I just didn't like with the package, is that I would like to have seen the camera have its own capture software. Like QHY have their own capture software called Easy Planetary, It's a shame that there is no capture software program with all the ZWO products, which I find it very, very strange. But if you go online, you can get some really good capture software, and the top recommendations for it is use ShortCap 2.1 or use Fire Capture, which apparently is the best capture software to use, especially for planets, because you can get the maximum high frame rate with that. However, I have tried to upload Fire Capture, and for some sort of reason I have a bit of running problems with it with my Windows 8.1. It does not seem to run it very well or detect the camera very well through it. So I need to start looking into that, because Fire Capture is the top program to use at the moment with this camera. However, on the internet or on the website of the ZWO, they also recommend ShortCap, and ShortCap runs very reliable with my Windows 8.1 computer. So there's no sort of big deal. As long as I can run some kind of high capture software program, that's completely fine. Plus, ShortCap 2 can also be used as a deep sky capturing software program, as well as a planetary capturing software. So I like ShortCap because it can do several things. Trouble with Fire Capture, it's more or less dedicated for planetary imaging use only. Now, dimensions of this camera. It's 62mm in diameter. Alright, so it's very compact, so it's not bulky. This is very, very good for if you've got a small telescope, so like a small refractor, an ED refractor, like an 80mm for example. This reduces a lot of the weight issues and balance issues with your telescope mounts and all that. One thing I do need to point out is that I would recommend, if you've got a good laptop, and I mean a laptop that has a USB 3 port, for example, if your computer has that, my top recommendations is to go for the USB 3 variant. Now the reason why I say that is because the USB 3 delivers very fast data transfer. This camera will push out a lot more frames per second. Now the standard USB model, which is the ASI120MC, that camera alone will push out on the maximum image of 1280 by 960 pixel size. This camera, the USB 2 will push out around about 30 frames per second, which is very fast for that sort of size, pixel size. If you're going to set the camera to the smaller pixel size of the 320 by 240, the USB 2 will push out 130 frames per second, which is very fast. Again, you can get a lot of detail with that. Again, another recommendation: you could get the mono version and you can get the color version. For you guys who are just first starting out and you want a very good high performance planetary camera, I would recommend getting the color. Now, a lot of the hardcore planetary users are using the monos, but I can't really see the point of using it. A lot of people might disagree with me with this part here. Even though the mono is sensitive, I prefer colour because colour makes things just that little bit easier. In fact, a lot more easier. Easy to set up. There's no need to invest in colour filters like the red, blue and green filters. And then you've got the problem investing in a filter wheel, and you end up spending a lot more than you should. And you could spend up to about £400 to £600 for the filter set and the filter wheel.
reason why planetary imagers prefer to use mono is that they're more sensitive, and basically with the imaging the planets, they can capture a little bit more detail. And also with mono, because it's there's no beta matrix in there, they are ultra fast. They can go up to about 230 frames per second, even more, because of the increase of the sensitivity that way. However, I can't see the need for it. It's just more money, a lot more hassle setting it up, and if you don't know what you're doing on mono or LRGB imaging, you can spend a lot of money. And to be honest with you, I prefer to get the colour. To be honest with you, I like the colour ones. Again, the USB 3, this model alone, with the highest pixel size of 1280 by 960, this camera will still push out around about 40 frames per second for a USB. I've used this camera around about 640 by 480. Now the USB model does about 70 frames per second. I was getting 117 frames per second through the USB 3. And then on the lowest setting, the 320 by 240 pixel size, I was getting 229 frames per second through this colour camera. So what you think about it is, get the USB 3. If you've got a computer that can take USB, get the USB model. And hence the reason the highest frame per second for our colour, especially this one. I think this is the fastest colour camera you can get, especially with that USB 3. That makes so much a difference, and that's why I got the colour one. I love the colours, and it just easy of use. They're easy to use, not less hassle to worry about. Now, trouble about with planetary imaging, the biggest hassle that you will face when you're imaging planets is basically centering the object into the telescope, get it into view, and then focus. They are the biggest ball ache for any planetary imager, and it's true. It is getting into the centre of field of view of the planet. Even though your go-to or if you've got your star alignment accurate, because planets are so small, you need a lot of boost scale. Basically, you need a barlow to boost the image up, to boost the scale up, so that the planet is literally trying to get in there, and that's the problem. Is getting it centered and getting the focus. Getting the focus is very crucial. What I mean is getting the focus properly is you need to get it spot on, because the atmosphere on the Earth is so turbulent. It shimmers and it's sort of guesswork. So another good advice is, when you're focusing an image, focus on a bright star and get yourself a Bannerstoff mask and focus the image on the star and get it as much pinpoint as you can. Save a lot of time and hassle, and achieve the best possible focus on those planets, because those planets are small, and again, that's the other thing. Also, when you're using mono cameras, you've got the problem of the filters and the filter wheel. That adds weight to your telescope mount, and also when you're fitting it onto a Barlow lens as well, you've got the problem of trying to combine the Barlow lens with the filter wheel system. However, on the colour cameras, you stick the Barlow straight away, and then it slots straight into your telescope. Boom, that's all you need to look at. So again, my top recommendation, if you've never done planetary imaging, or you're just getting into it, is just get a coloured one. But to be honest with you, Even the most experienced astronomers prefer to use colour. I'm just a big believer of hassle-free stuff, and if you're paying for high quality product, I would, for the sake of losing a little bit of sensitivity, and it isn't that much, really, it's not that much at all. So I would just get the colour variant. So it's just peace of mind, and it just works for me. To be honest with you, I love colour. However, for DSO imaging, if you're using a colour camera, that might be a bit different. Again, DSO imaging, if you're going to use this camera for DSO imaging, you can get really good detail on the deep sky objects. But again, that's when the mono will be far superior, is when you start using your filter wheel and your filters on deep sky objects. The sensitivity rate on this is immense. Again, this camera can also be adapted to 1:1 binning mode, which is the resolution and really fine pixel size. But this camera can also go to 2x binning mode. Basically, you're increasing the pixel size, making this much more sensitive, but you do lose a little bit of the resolution. So again, perfect for like deep sky objects. If you want to increase the sensitive of this camera to 2x2 binning, so and you can capture the data much quicker and help to reduce the exposure times. So again, if you're going to get the mono variant, which is the ASI120mm S, which is again, it's a USB 3 camera which gives out the high speed. Believe it or not, on the maximum pixel size of this camera, if you get the mono variant, will actually go at 70 frames per second at the 1280 by 960 pixel size. So that's 70 frames per second on the highest thing. I don't know what's the lowest, but I'm guessing it's like in the 300 frames per second limit. I'm sure it's definitely got to be. But again, that is ultimately fast. Again, the mono variant will be a little bit more expensive on telescope service, around about €395 for the mono variant of this. Personally, I went for the colour. I just want to stick the camera onto the telescope and start imaging straight away. I don't want hassle. Plus, with colour, because it can be used as a deep sky object, a deep sky imager, a guider, and all that. This is the camera. Is basically all I need. If this camera came out a lot earlier, I wouldn't have got my QHY5L2, even though it shares the same chip. Believe it or not, it's the same chip as the QHY5L2. I would have just got this because it has more functionality. It's more dual purpose. But again, there's nothing wrong with the QHY5L2, which is very good. If this camera came out earlier, this would have been the camera for me, definitely, without a doubt. So that includes the close-up and the specifications of this camera and the contents of the box. What we're going to do now is we're going to take a closer look on the software. Now, unfortunately, a lot of people are using file capture. Unfortunately, it doesn't work on my computer. Windows 8.1 doesn't seem to run it very well, as the camera doesn't detect it. So I'll be using Shortcut 2.1 just to show you the performance of this camera. And believe me, you will be very surprised on how it performs. It's something else. This camera is unbelievable. So we're going to take a closer look on the camera itself, on the running software. So I'm on my computer and I'm going to demonstrate how the camera works with Shortcut 2. Now I tried to download Fire Capture, but I've had problems with my PayPal account and I couldn't purchase the software. Believe me, a lot of astronomers use Fire Capture with this camera. It's the best program to use to get the maximum frames per second rate. However, Shortcap 2 is much better now. It's a lot more stable and it works with the camera quite well, and the frames per second rate is also good. Also, I like Shortcap 2 because it's extremely easy to use, and as well as being great for capturing videos of planets, it can also be used as a great deep sky imager. So what we're going to do now, we're going to click on Shortcap 2, and as you can see, the program boots up straight away with the camera. Top tip, make sure that your camera drivers have been installed on your computer before you download Shortcap 2. Right, as you can see here, the 1280 by 960 mode. So this is the biggest video size you can get for this camera. I'm going to show you the color space option, and as you can see, the camera can be used in mono and also as a raw color image that's debayed. This I never bothered. I basically use RGB 24-bit mode and it works for me. The capture area is on the high setting. Now the reason why it's at that setting is that this is ideal for taking wide field shots of the moon or the sun, but also will help you try to locate the planets. Planets are very tiny and you need to boost up your camera pixel video so that you can find your planet in view. Now, top tip, what I would do before you start imaging planets is set up your camera during the day, and what I would do is align your main scope on a terrestrial object like a lamppost, an aerial or chimney pot, which is around about 2 to 3 kilometers away from you. Place the camera, align it to the main tube so the camera's lens is basically in the middle, so whatever you're viewing is in the middle, and then go to your finder scope or a Telrad or red dot finder and readjust the finder scope so that the crosshairs are aligned within the main scope. Then if you've got a Barlow lens, attach the Barlow lens onto the camera, fit it onto the main tube, readjust the focus, recenter into the field of view of the camera's chip, and then readjust your finder scope. Now the reason for doing this will help you save a lot of time and effort, and will give you a better chance to find these planets within the chip. Because they're very tiny, no matter how good your polar alignment or your star alignment or your go-to, I'll guarantee you will not be centered in the field of view of the camera's lens. So you just make sure that you do that prior to imaging planets at night. So do this before you start imaging through your telescope at night. Do your star alignment first. Focus on a bright star, but my top advice is I recommend you to get a Bannerstoff mask, which is a mask that you put over your telescope tube, over the objective lens or the main mirror. And what you do is you focus the star, the bright star, and you adjust the focus until you get a pinpoint image. Take off the mask, lock the focuser so you don't readjust the focus by mistake, and then you should be focused properly so that you're ready to image the planets. The reasons why you need to get focus is that focus is very crucial. If you're not focused, you will lose detail and resolution on the planets. So having the best focus as possible will give you better results on the camera's recording. Make sure you get your telescope well focused, ready to capture. I'm going to now show you a few handy little tips to use the Shortcut 2 software with the camera. Here you've got the color space format. I never really bothered with the settings, but the camera can be used to record in mono or a de-Bayed colored image. I've never really bothered with those because I have a colored camera. I just stick with the RGB 24-bit mode and I stick with that setting. Now with the capture area, it's on the maximum chip size. Now the secret to planetary imaging is, if you want wide field views, you can use that function. But the thing I've noticed with Shortcut 2 is that I like this little feature at this bottom. As you can see with at the bottom with my mouse pointing, is look at this rate. This is the frames per second rate, and this tells you how many frames you're capturing per second. The secret to planetary imaging is you need to get as much as the frames you can within a second. The more frames you capture, the more likely you're going to get better images. What I found out that most the camera offers in different video recording modes, but I found out that most of the video modes you use the most is the 640 by 480. As you lower the frames per rate, you'll notice as you lower the exposure time, the frames per second increases. The lower the exposure rate, the better the frames per second. And as you can see here, I'm getting 118 frames per second, which shows this is faster than my QHY IMG 132E camera. Even at the 640 by 480 mode, the QHY will probably achieve around about 70 frames. Even when the camera is set in 640 by 480 mode, on a good day it will achieve 60 to 70 frames per second, maybe 80 if I'm lucky. But as you can see, the ZWO is far superior, and I'm achieving 118 frames per second. Now the secret to planetary imaging is you need to focus more of those frames as possible. The higher the frame rate, the better your image is going to be. If I go into the selection again, and I go into if I select the 320 by 240 mode, the camera shoots up to 225 frames per second. So it just shows you when you decrease the camera's chip size, you will speed up the camera's performance, and this is fantastic to get really good images of planets. Faster the frame rate, the better. However, in this chip size alone, this is not adequate for capturing images of Jupiter. Because the planet is big, I will have difficulty to try and fit this planet in this size chip, and it makes it increasingly more difficult to get it centered in the field of view. So my finder scope and my main scope has to be very well accurately aligned. This mode is great for imaging small planets, like for example if you're imaging Mars. Achieving this speed will give you really good results with capturing Mars. Because Mars is extremely difficult to image anyway, you need to maximize as much frames as possible. And this would be a good video mode. However, when I did my capture 2 days ago, I used 480 by 480 mode to capture Jupiter. I think this is a very good mode for Jupiter. Don't forget, whatever telescope you use will give you very different results. Now I use a Skywatcher 127mm Maxitov telescope, and I use a 2x Barlow lens attached to the camera. This setting here fits perfectly with my Jupiter with reasonable field of view. So this is the setting I use. If you're capturing planets for the first time, I would recommend that you take your recordings on the 640 by 480 mode. Now I'm going to show you another function, is the binning. Now this binning function on ShortCap 2 will allow the camera to increase the sensitivity, and what you're doing is when you increase the sensitivity to 2x2, if you select 2, it will go to 2x2 binning mode. What this function will do is will increase the sensitivity of the camera, and which will allow the light photons to gather quickly. This is great for capturing deep sky objects because they are extremely dim. However, when you use this setting, I would not recommend that you use the 2x2 binning mode, because when you use this mode, you will lose resolution on the camera, which means that you'll lose planetary detail. So I would not recommend that you use the 2x2 binning mode. I recommend that you select the 1x1 binning mode, because one, it gives you a big field of view, and you're not going to lose resolution on the planets. Now, if I click on this, you will have 3 functions. You have an AVI files, PNG files, and then you have the FITS files. Now, AVI files are recommended that you use for planetary imaging, because AVI files are basically video file. Basically, you're doing a recording of the planets. You're doing a live recording of the planets. I would not recommend that you use the PNG files, because they are a reduced file. When you use this mode, you might interrupt the resolution and the detail on the planets. So I recommend that you use AVI files. Plus, PNG files do not work in Registacks. You cannot stack PNG files with Registack 6. So select AVI files. And then you've got another function called the FITS files. These are used for when you're using the camera as a deep sky imager. So when you're taking images of, say, like Andromeda, for example, or the Orion Nebula, when you're taking deep sky objects, always select FITS files, because they are basically files that will work with Deep Sky Stacker. So don't get confused between the two. Remember, AVI files are for planets and FITS files for deep sky imaging. So we're going to select AVI files because we're taking planets. Once you're focused with the image, and we select the highest chip size, there's another nice feature that I do like, is this. If we go into this icon here and we click on it, this will help you center the planet you want to image, so you get it central, and you can select different functions. You can select the crosshair or the bullseye circle function, but I select the crosshairs. I also like this reticle, because when you're taking a planetary video, the crosshair does not interfere with your recording, so it will not show up on the video. One thing that I need to let you know is that if you accidentally move the crosshair, for example, you move it here by mistake with your mouse on the computer, don't worry about it. Do not adjust your telescope mount, because if you do that, you will readjust your star alignment and your go-to function on the telescope. So if you do make a mistake, go to the icon, click on no reticle, it will switch it off, and then switch on the crosshair, and then it will recenter into the position. Again, I'll just come off it, select the crosshair again, and it will recenter in the field of view. Now, the secret with planetary imaging, as well as thinking about your frames per second rate, you need to focus on the exposure rate. Now, when you increase the exposure rate, it is great when you're trying to get Jupiter, for example, and you want to get its moons. Increasing the exposure rate will get the moons in view. However, when you increase the exposure rate, you will then start to lose detail on the planet. Now, if you're using a 2x Barlow on the camera, I would recommend, and you want a close-up of the planet, then my advice to you is lower the exposure rate as much as possible. And by doing that, is when you lower the exposure rate, is what you're doing is you're not overexposing your image, because if you overexpose your image, you will lose detail on the planet, and when you do stack it, it will not show up on the stacked image. Select the 640 by 480 mode, because that is a good general video size. And if you want close up of the planet, lower the exposure rate down as much as possible, so that you just barely see the planet's disk. You may see a hint of the detail, but you lower it so you just barely see the disk. Now, do not worry if you're taking the recording and it doesn't show up on the screen very well. The main objective to this is that you want to capture as much of this detail, so when you do stack the image in Registat 6, you will then be able to process it through Photoshop, or using the Registat 6 software, you can adjust the histogram and brighten up the planet's disk that way, so you can do a post-processing. So don't worry about the recording. All your main focus is capturing all that detail as possible. So you basically set the exposure to a level so that the disk is just visible, and also lower the gain. You lower the gain as much as possible, because if you don't lower the gain, if you stack the image on the high setting of gain, as you can see on this level here, this will show up as a noisy image. So you lower the gain as much as possible. Again, you've got to cut the balance between the gain and the exposure rate. So when you lower the gain, you may have to increase the exposure rate a little bit more. But again, as I look at my mouse pointer, look at the frames per second rate, and do it so that you've got the maximum frames per second. So check your gain, adjust your exposure. If you adjust your gain, you need to increase your exposure slightly. If you start to drop, if I up my exposure, if I increase the exposure and I start to drop, then you need to drop the exposure down to get the rate you want. Again, if you start to lose frames, adjust your exposure and your gain. This is the top tip if you want excellent planetary images. Don't worry if the planet is very dim on your recordings. The main you can always adjust it and register at 6 and adjust the histogram. So once you're centered and you focus and you've got the maximum frames per second and you've got the right video mode and you've got the right gain and the exposure rate you want, you can now begin your capture. And to do this, we select Start Capture. Shortcut 2 gives you a series of functions you can do. You can either take a single frame, you can take unlimited amount of frames, or you can set different types of frames. However, you are taking AVI files, so I recommend that you select time limit. For planets, you can select between 2 to 3 minutes is ideal for most planets. However, with Jupiter, you cannot take more than 90 seconds of AVI files. Now, the reason for this is that the planet rotates at 9 hours. So when you're taking an exposure of that planet, if you take longer than that time limit, you will start to introduce, you'll get the rotations on the planet. So basically, when you stack your image, the planet will be blurred because the clouds, the planet is rotating that fast. You will start to see the planet spin. So I highly recommend that you set your exposures when you're imaging Jupiter, is set it at 90 seconds maximum. Again, to define the digits, these 2 zeros means hours, the 1 means minutes, and the 30 means is in seconds. So I set mine to 1 minute and 30 seconds, which is 90 seconds. So before we start our capture, first off we need to cancel that and we need to set up our capture folder. It is very important that you set your capture folder, because if you are capturing video files, if you don't set the folder, you might not be able to find your folders or your video files and you don't know exactly where they're being stored. So just make sure that you set your capture folder. I've already set mine. I basically opened my folder and this is my capture folder, as you can see here. So before you do any recordings, make sure you get your capture folder set. So we're going to begin our capture. We set it as it is and we're going to begin the recording. So we click on start and now it will start to capture the planet we're recording. Now at the moment I've dropped down frames per second rate. Don't worry about that. If you do drop in frames per rate, you may have to readjust your gain and your exposure rate and then try again. And the top tip is do several recordings of your capture and get the right sort of exposure right and gain. I can see here I've dropped down to about 32 frames per second, but again readjust it and maximize it. And again, capture's complete, and then we'll minimize that. We're going to look at our capture folder, and as you can see, this is our capture folder. Good thing about Shortcap is that I like how you can access the camera settings, so you know which settings which, so that when you come to image a planet again, you know what settings you will set again to help you. this is the capture we got there of the AVI file. Now, as you can see, because of the lower frame rates, it is 3.79 gigabytes. So that is a lot of memory. So when you're using this high-speed camera, I advise you that you've got plenty of hard drive space when you're capturing these planetary videos. So we're going to cancel that, and what we're going to do is we'll go back again and we're going to readjust the exposure limit, because the main focus is you need to get it so you can set your exposure limit. And again, adjusting gain and exposure rate to suit your positions. It all depends. And then you reset your capture again. Do the capture again. And now you can see that certain exposure times and certain adjustment of gain, you can tell straight away that we're now achieving 118 frames per second. Now it really does depend on how much gain you want and how much exposure you set. You'll have to toggle it between the two. So we'll wait now for the video to be completed. Again, we're adjusting the exposure and gain to the correct amount, but again it just depends every night. And then now Shortcap has finished the capture. Click OK, and then we're going to minimize it. We're going to look at our capture folder, and then here is our capture, and then this is our AVI file. And as you can see at the bottom, you can tell straight away from that capture we did, this is 9 gig for that short film. So more frames per second you get, the bigger the file's going to be. But what it means is you're going to get more frames, and for you to stack in Registacks 6, so you can achieve these really good high resolution images. So this is the secret to good planetary images. So now what we're going to do now, we're going to now look at the images we've just stacked. So here's my capture folder, and these are my latest images using the ASI120MC S camera, and these are my images. Again, these are stacked in Registacks 6, and this is the 480 by 480 video mode, and this is the actual video size of the planet in real scale using my Maxutov 127 with the 2x Barlow. As you can see, these weren't ideal conditions because I had bad turbulence atmosphere, so the skies weren't great. And the reason why you can tell if you got bad skies is if you look at the stars, and if they twinkle or they twinkle all the time, it means that your skies, the Earth's atmosphere, is very unsteady. So every night will be different. If the stars do not twinkle and you got really good steady skies, which means you have a good chance of getting better detail. Again, this is Jupiter in the opposition, So obviously when you're imaging planets, make sure the ideal time is get planets in opposition where the planets are in the highest point in the sky and they're the closest towards Earth. So get them on the opposition times because you're more likely get the best chance of getting you get the best planetary images. So I had rubbish skies, and you can see Jupiter's got really good detail on there. I'm quite impressed. Through a 5-inch scope, and here again the same image edited in Photoshop, so a bit of post-processing. Now the planet appears dim on the stacked image, so when you go to Registack 6, once you've stacked the image and it's aligned, you click on the histogram on Registacks, the histogram on Registack 6, and you adjust the level so the disk will brighten up so you can compensate for the dimness. My best advice is take series of video clips, because the more you collect the data, the more you get very different results through different exposure times and gain time, and adjust those gains, adjust the exposure rate, and just trial and error, just test these frames per second and the times, and you get very different results. Now these two images is probably the best ones I got that night, and I managed to get 118 frames per second. The others, like this one, but which proves that if you have less frames per second, you're less likely to get a defined image. As with this one and this one, this was taken at 118 frames per second, and you can tell the detail is a lot more. So again, which proves my theory, maximizing the frames per second does help you achieve better results with the images. The more the merrier. So we minimize that, and now I'm going to show you how to use the camera as a deep sky imager. And to do this, what I like about Shortcut 2, it's so easy. When you begin your capture, again, set your capture folder. Obviously I've got mine set. Once you're happy, a DSO image, especially for large DSOs, say like I'm taking M31, the Andromeda Galaxy. Because the camera chip is very small, you need to maximize the chip size. So to do that, you again select capture area, select the maximum setting, and then there you go. So what you're doing now is that you got your capture folder, you got your resolution. You may use the binning mode, right? Increase the sensitivity, and what that does is it will reduce the image size, but will maintain the field of view. So if you're imaging very dim deep sky objects, then switch to 2x2 binning mode. If it's quite bright, like the Orion Nebula, you can use 1x1 binning mode. Just bear in mind that when you use the 2x2 binning mode, you will lose resolution even for the deep sky objects. So it depends on what you want with the camera. So for the time being, I'm going to use 1x1 binning mode. And then the good thing about Shortcut, it's incredibly easy. What Shortcut will do is when you adjust the exposure, you'll then go into a second. So I'm in 3 seconds, then 15, and you can actually increase the exposure by using the arrow keys as well on the keyboard, so you can adjust them all the way up, and you can go up to 300 seconds, even up to 1000 seconds. You can get some really good detail on these deep sky objects. Once you're happy with the settings, make sure you do not make the mistake by leaving the settings to AVI files, as AVI files are used for planets. Use the fixed file setting, because fixed files you'll be able to stack the images using Deep Sky Stacker. Once you're happy with the set exposure of 191 seconds, we're now ready to take the image. However, because it's in preview mode, I would wait. My top recommendations is to wait until it's finished the frame, so that you can see and evaluate your image, and basically just to check, see if you're in view of the deep sky object in the center, and also to check that the stars are not trailing, because if the stars are trailing, you may need to adjust your mount or your go-to on your handset. Once you've got pinpoint stars and the images of your deep sky object is central, you can then begin your capture. You start your capture, you click on number of frames, ideally between 30 or 50 frames. Once you've got your settings there, okay, you can then begin your capture, and you click start, and at the bottom you'll have the frame. So that's the work. This is the workload of the frame getting produced of 191 seconds, and then you have the frames left of how many frames it's going to be collected. So basically, you leave the telescope alone, leave the camera to do its work, and enjoy the views. So once it's completed, you should have loads of deep sky images of lights for you to stack in Deep Sky Stacker. Once you've got all your lights of your deep sky object, for demonstration purposes, I'm just going to stop the capture. Now, one thing I need to let you know is that the camera is not cooled. Most CCD cameras dedicated for deep sky imaging are fitted with a pelter cooling fan. Now, the camera does not have that function. So when you increase the exposure rate to capture these faint fuzzies, you need to take dark frames to compensate for the camera's noise. Now, this camera's noise is caused by the heat from the electronics, and this heat affects the images, and what you get on your images is these hot pixels. They look like stars at first, but when you look closely, you see these hot pixels, and they're like a red, a blue, and a green, and they just do not look part of the image itself. So by taking darks, again, you take between 20 to 30 darks, depending on how many frames you've taken. I would take 20 just for the safe side, and you keep your exposure the same, not adjusting the focus, and all you do is replace the dust cap on your telescope, and then you set your camera capture, adjust it how many frames you want, go for 20, and then once your dust cap's in place, you then start and do the same process. It's very easy to do. Once you've got all your dark frames, you then combine your frames with your light frames in Deep Sky Stacker. and then what that will do, it will help you get rid of those horrible hot coloured pixels in your images and improve the original stacked image. So it's very important that you have to take dark images. We're going to stop the capture because there's no point, and I'm going to minimize the exposure. Set the AVI files. So now I've taught you how to use the camera, not only to use it as a planetary camera, but also as a deep sky imaging camera. I hope this guide helped you. It certainly gave me some experience with the software using Shortcut 2. Again, conclusions, I'm actually quite impressed how the camera's performed, and I seriously recommend to beginners and advanced users to use this camera. I'm actually quite impressed at how it's performed. I hope this guide's helped you get used to using, if you've never done imaging before or never done a planetary imaging before, I hope this guide's helped you dramatically. Again, if you want to take planetary imaging seriously, then get this camera by all means, because this camera will work for you. And this camera is used by a lot of the famous astrophotographers like Damien Peach, and he's got some amazing images using this camera. So again, and please feel free to answer any questions regarding this video, and thanks again, thanks for watching, and clear skies.